Good evening. Thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business, and I'm Paul Graney. Are falling commodity prices a sign the recovery is slowing? Economist Daniel Akaya says demand in Asia isn't so hot. Volkswagen CEO wants to overtake Tesla, but how will low lithium supply slow them down? And more pressure on President Biden as 21 states sue him for cancelling the Keystone pipeline. That and much more coming up at NTD Business. Another 770,000 Americans filed for unemployment benefits for the first time last week. That's more than economists predicted. Compared to February 2020, the U.S. is down 9.5 million jobs. But some economists believe the labor market will get much better through the rest of the year as things start to get back to normal. Claims shot up in Texas last week, probably caused by last month's snowstorms. But it didn't see as many as Ohio. The state's been plagued by unemployment fraud, is now reporting that 20,000 of its 115,000 claims last week were filed for fraud. And there's been fraud in New York as well. A New York City man is charged with wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. He took almost $1.5 million in unemployment benefits meant for pandemic relief. Investigators say the 41-year-old submitted multiple applications from the same computer IP address and used his dog's name Benji as a security question every time. The government then mailed him 250 prepaid debit cards with the relief money to different mail addresses. Agents then raided his home and found his dog with Benji inscribed on his collar. They also found a laptop open to the unemployment benefits application page. The guy faces 22 years in prison. Benji. The Paycheck Protection Program also struggles with fraudulent claims. That's the government's aid for small businesses. But Congress still planning to extend the program's deadline. We spoke with many businesses on this show that were delighted with the program last year. But now that we're a year in, not everyone thinks continuing it is a good idea. NTD's Phil Zoe has the details.
The House just passed a bill that would extend the Payment Protection Program until the end of May. If it gets final approval, that would mean small businesses will get more time to apply for funding. But not everyone agrees this is a good idea.
The PPP program at this point subsidizes and incentivizes and encourages this irresponsible behavior on the parts of those governors and mayors who refuse to reopen their societies.
He's referring to states like New York and California where schools and businesses are still shut down for the most part. Instead of handing out PPP loans, he says it's better to open up all businesses and allow people to get back to work.
In the states that have allowed their societies to reopen, we actually see economies booming. We see economies that are bigger now than they were a year ago. We see unemployment rates that are coming down.
Earlier this month, President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan. It included $7 billion for expanding the PPP program.
It's not right to force the rest of the country to pay for these incredibly awful decisions by these governors and mayors. It's time to allow these businesses to resume operations.
So far this year, the Small Business Administration has already approved $181 billion worth of PPP loans. The current bill, the PPP Extension Act of 2021, is headed to the Senate now for review. Phil Zoe, NTD News.
Another pandemic relief policy is the eviction ban. You basically can't kick anyone out for non-payment at the moment, but that's due to expire at the end of the month. But now over 2,000 groups want President Biden to extend it till the pandemic's over. They say evictions put lives at risk and they could increase the spread of the virus because people will have to move in with others, often in close quarters. But landlords, property owners have a problem. They can't afford to house people for free. And the president of the National Apartment Association says the bans leave renters with huge debt and make it harder for property owners to provide safe housing since they can't afford the upkeep without rental income. Something else for President Biden to consider is the decision to cancel the Keystone pipeline. It was set to bring oil from Canada and create U.S. jobs at the same time, but Biden canceled it for environmental reasons. But now states are pushing back and 21 of them are now suing the administration. NTD's Tom Ozimek reports.
A coalition of 21 states is suing President Biden for canceling the Keystone XL pipeline permit. The states claim Biden exceeded his authority when he pulled the permit on his first day in office. Biden said the pipeline does not serve America's interest, and leaving it in place would be inconsistent with his administration's economic and climate imperatives. But the lawsuit says only Congress has the power to regulate interstate and international commerce, including issuing or pulling pipeline permits. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who leads the coalition, says that not only is Biden's decision unlawful, it will also devastate the livelihoods of thousands of workers, their families, and their communities. The Keystone XL pipeline was designed to transport oil from Canada and Montana to junctions in the middle of America and to refineries in Houston. President Trump revived the project after it stalled under the Obama administration. Trump is a strong advocate of America's oil patch. He pursued policies that expanded domestic oil production and furthered American energy independence. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
Oil prices tumbled today, falling for a fifth straight day in a row. WTI down 5%, biggest intraday drop since December. The 10-year Treasury yields as well hit a 14-month high, is putting fresh pressure on tech and other stocks. The Dow fell 153 points, 0.46%. S&P 500 lost 59 points, or 1.48%. But the Nasdaq, it dropped 409 points, about 3%. So oil down significantly today, so is copper, both of which have performed extremely well on those expectations of a strong economic recovery. So now Daniel Akaya thinks the falling prices could be a sign of a slower bounce back than expected, especially in Asia. Lakai is the chief economist at the Tressis hedge fund that has $6 billion of assets under its management.
I think that there are some signals out there that show us that the recovery could be slowing down, at least for a while. For example, I think it's interesting that copper, which is a good bellwether of industrial production and global recovery, it has basically reached a top and is moving to lower highs little by little. I think it's also quite evident that we see that the strong rise in iron ore, copper, and also oil is started to be coming off in the last couple of weeks. And I think that is important because it comes fundamentally from weakness in Asian demand. So it looks like Chinese buying is slowing down, and there obviously might be a seasonal effect, but in a world in which investment banks and investors are betting so aggressively on a very robust recovery, these little signals that show, that the economy might be growing at a slower pace than was initially expected, particularly in Asia.
Could it be because you mentioned, everybody it seems is speaking about inflation, the reflation trade, I believe, and some commentators were saying that a lot of these commodities may have been just overbought, people overbuying them in anticipation. You think it could just be a correction, a pullback maybe?
I think it's an interesting point. There is obviously an important physical element to the trade that we have seen, and the activity from physical buyers, from traders in the energy space in particular has been very, very strong. But I agree that obviously you have seen big inflows into ETFs of commodities and commodity-linked products. So I think that we probably could see some unwinding of that trade after its a strong run at the beginning of the year. A few people are saying that the inflationary trade might be 1 month away from its end, or that basically the level of increase in the price of some of the commodities basically has run its course for what was expected to recover in 2021. I think that what I find more interesting, however, is that in the physical market, you do see a slowdown coming from Asia.
Daniel, really appreciate it as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Green policies are making the electric vehicle space a hot market. And naturally, Volkswagen CEO wants to overtake Tesla. The German automaker is now ramping up battery production, but soaring lithium prices amid low supply could slow down their plans. NTD's Phil Zoe reports.
Volkswagen CEO says he wants to get close and then overtake Tesla. The German automaker is going full speed ahead with electric vehicles to do it.
We are once again stepping up the pace of our electrification offensive and pursuing our ambitions. By 2030, our electric vehicles will account for at least 70% of our sales in Europe and 50% of our sales in North America and China.
And they're going at it without Tesla's help.
Battery cell competence, we believe, is something that we need to also grow within the company. We do not necessarily need to partner up with other car makers to collaborate.
But electric vehicles are hampered by a shortage of lithium, a crucial battery component. One lithium producer says this improves the overall investment environment.
One of the key factors in the increase in lithium and spodumene prices really has been the fact that most lithium raw material supply is tied up in long-term contracts.
There'll be problems with getting enough lithium for major electrification efforts all over the world. Mining new sources is no simple matter.
It is concerning. The average time between discovering a lithium deposit and being able to bring it into production is somewhere around 8 to 12 years. So you just can't really whistle up new production of lithium overnight.
On the other hand, limited lithium supply forces innovation.
Higher efficiency means you can have fewer battery cells and a smaller overall pack capacity and still have the range to go just as far. Efficiency right now is the key metric. How much range can you get out of each kilowatt hour of battery cell that you have?
There are currently no easy alternatives for lithium.
A lot of work going on in solid state batteries. There's a lot of work going on in low lithium type research, but it's a long time to get from the lab into production.
China is by far the largest electric vehicle market, with the EU being comparable if taken as a single bloc. The US is a distant third. Phil Zoe, NTD News.
One labor union is very upset at Ford for its plans to move some production that was planned for Ohio to Mexico. Ford didn't confirm the news when we asked, but the union says it's ready to take action. NTD's Sapphire Quarters explains.
The United Auto Workers Union is criticizing Ford over its plans for a car factory in Ohio. UAW Vice President Gerald Kareem says in 2019, Ford committed $900 million for the plant and would start building a new model there in 2023. But he says recently Ford told the union it's moving the new model production to Mexico and didn't give a good reason. Kareem blasted Ford for not honoring its promise. He says if Ford fails to meet its commitments, the union will take action. Ohio plant manager Jason Moore sent a letter to the workers. He said conditions have changed since 2019. The firm is investing in the plant and will increase Super Duty truck production there. Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, a vocal advocate of labor and labor unions, also criticized Ford's decision.
Ohioans are tired of watching corporation after corporation abandon the workers and communities that have made their businesses successful.
We reached out to Ford for comment. A Ford spokesperson didn't respond to the plan to move production to Mexico. Instead, Ford says it invests in America more than any other automaker. And since 2019, it has invested more than $185 million at the Ohio plant, as well as created and retained more than 100 jobs there, including actions planned for this year. General Motors in 2019 stopped production of the Chevy Cruze at a Lordstown, Ohio factory. It impacted hundreds of jobs in the area. President Biden, whom the UAW endorsed, has reportedly sought to focus on American car manufacturing as part of his plan to create new car industry jobs. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
Google says it'll invest $7 billion across the United States this year. Big investment, but it's actually down from the $10 billion last year. Conway G. Gittins reports.
Google announced Thursday that it plans to invest over $7 billion in the U.S. this year and create at least 10,000 new full-time jobs. The spending is specifically earmarked for offices and data centers in the U.S. as the tech giant copes with the surge in online traffic driven by more users and advertisers flocking to the web during the health crisis. The total spending number, however, is down compared to the past 2 years. As for its home state of California, Google plans to spend $1 billion at a time when other firms are leaving Silicon Valley. The area has seen a corporate exodus as of late due to complaints of high rents and high state taxes. Google's spending plans come amid ongoing scrutiny of its business practices. Sources tell Reuters Justice Department investigators are probing whether a Google plan to limit the use of online user tracking software known as cookies will harm the competition. The U.S. has been investigating Google's search and ad business for antitrust behavior for nearly 2 years and sued Google in October for allegedly using anti-competitive tactics to maintain the dominance of its search engine. Congress has also been exploring Google parent Alphabet and fellow tech giants Facebook, Apple, and Amazon for anti-competitive behavior. Shares of Google parent Alphabet up about 18% so far this year.
If you're behind in your taxes, don't worry. You may get an extra month this year to pay your dues. The IRS is planning to delay the tax filing deadline until mid-May. That's according to one official at least. That official says the government wants to give Americans more time because the pandemic made taxes more complicated for some. But the IRS is also swamped with its own workload right now. The service is still processing millions of 2020 tax returns, while at the same time sending out a new round of stimulus checks, dealing with the new unemployment benefits and expanded child tax credits. But keep in mind, even if the IRS gives you more time, state taxes in most cases are still due by April 15th. But if you're filing in Hawaii, Delaware, Iowa, Virginia, Louisiana, or Maryland, you have more time for state taxes as well. No New York? And a Senate committee wants to close any loopholes it finds around the human trafficking and slave labor trade. One example that came up at a hearing today quite often is China's forced labor in the Xinjiang region. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
The Senate Finance Committee held a hearing Thursday on fighting forced labor. It focused on closing loopholes to make sure U.S. supply chains don't use forced labor. The committee chairman singled out forced labor in China's Xinjiang region.
2 U.S. administrations have now concluded that what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghurs people in the Xinjiang region in western China constitutes genocide. The Chinese government and Chinese companies are using forced labor from that region to produce a variety of products.
The panel heard from several witnesses, including president of the Human Trafficking Legal Center.
That at this point, companies should simply not be in Xinjiang. There is no reason to be there anymore. And this rebuttable presumption that goods coming from that region are made with forced labor, I think must stand.
She said companies that are being investigated for using forced labor are now suing the groups investigating them.
These retaliatory legal actions have a chilling effect on NGOs, which we can only surmise is their intent. And Chinese corporations have filed a suit in China against Adrian Zentz, a US-based human rights researcher who has documented widespread forced labor in Xinjiang.
She says there needs to be more transparency from China so the United States can find out what's coming into the country. She also says the US should track Chinese goods more closely to see where they are sourced from. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Still to come, the largest fine ever. The FCC is fining a telemarketer for sending robocalls. Find out how much the company has to pay after the break. And Hollywood's red carpet is empty for this year's award season. But behind the scenes, workers struggle to make a living as in-person events go virtual. Find out more in just a minute.
just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
The Federal Communications Commission has issued its largest fine in history. Texas-based Telemarketers will have to pay $225 million for sending about 1 billion robocalls claiming to sell insurance. They made the calls during the first 4 months of 2019. Many of them were illegally spoofed. That means they have a fake caller ID, making them appear to come from a nearby location. The FCC says the callers falsely claimed to sell insurance from well-known companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield and Cigna. Now, to combat the issue, the FCC is creating a new response team that will focus on anti-robocall efforts. It's the heroes we need. And award season is upon us, but the pandemic has put a damper on events like the Oscars, the Grammys. But it's the people behind the scenes who are actually struggling the most. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
The red carpet has long been an iconic symbol of Hollywood fame. During a normal award season, Tony Calicoglu's Red Carpet Systems was supplying carpets to 25 to 50 events a week. That's including parties thrown by Vanity Fair magazine and stars like Elton John. But the pandemic has upended his business. This season, Caligulu estimates he's lost about 80% of his events business.
We've lost about 80% of our events in this award seasons. It's just very hard. I don't know how to explain it. It's tough. It's tough.
Fortunately for Caligulu, he has been able to pivot to making dividers for essential businesses and large backdrops for people to use in video calls. The pandemic has proved devastating for the entertainment industry, shutting down movie theaters and music venues and hindering film and television production. The security guards, florists, caterers, waiters, limousine drivers, and photographers who make a living during the Golden Globes, Grammys, and Oscars are also out of work. A 2013 report by the Los Angeles Economic Development Council said that Oscar season contributes about $130 million to the city's economy annually. But with awards this year reduced to mostly online events, those behind the scenes are struggling. A year ago, photographer Alberto Rodriguez would have been jostling for position on a celebrity red carpet during Hollywood's hectic awards season. He was one of the very few photographers allowed to roam red carpets and interact with celebrities. To make ends meet, Rodriguez is now delivering food and driving for Uber.
It's strange being back here at the Dolby Theater. I haven't probably been here in almost a year, and it's an awkward feeling not being part of the award season for the Golden Globes or the Oscars after 20 years of doing it.
Award season is the gold mine for many in the Los Angeles area, from the stylists to personal bodyguards. But for now, they're holding out hope for next season. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
But America's largest movie theater chain says most of its theaters will open their doors to customers again this weekend. AMC Theaters reports 98% of its locations in the U.S. will be open by Friday. The company says it will only reopen its theaters after state and local authorities approve the plan. The company closed its locations last year in response to the CCP virus pandemic. And that's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie at Cox. It's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, though, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.